Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a review on The Haunting of Bly Manor. So, before I do head into my thoughts and feelings on The Haunting of Bly Manor, quick note, no spoilers. I'm dying to talk about spoilers, but I'm going to contain myself, not put any here in this video. But that's most certainly the point of the comment system down below this video. If you want to share your thoughts and feelings, if you want to go into more spoilers, please feel free to do so, because I would certainly love to have a conversation with you guys about this particular season, because it was pretty wild, but so good. So yeah, let me get going into my thoughts and feelings in this review of The Haunting of Bly Manor. Let me get my notes prepared, as I usually do here, you guys. So yeah, this is what you need to know about The Haunting of Bly Manor if you've not watched it already. It is on Netflix, has 9 episodes, and the big thing with this season, because this is a spin-off of The Haunting of Hill House. They're calling this whole anthology The Haunting series, so every time they do a season it's going to be called The Haunting of whatever. So yeah, we had season 1, if you want to think about it that way, I guess. You had The Haunting of Hill House, which was based off of The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which was like a very loose adaptation of that book. So yeah, this particular season is based largely off of The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. But it not only incorporates The Turn of the Screw, it also, this season heavily incorporates just other various short stories, short ghost stories by Henry James. And I have never read Henry James, you guys. I've never read The Turn of the Screw. I've never read any of his other short stories. I do own a collection of The Turn of the Screw with a bunch of the short stories. I do own a collection of that, which I'm dying to get to now that I've seen The Haunting of Bly Manor. I'm very anxious to read the stories now. So yeah, that's essentially what you gotta know about this season, based off The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. And the story, it takes place in England in 1987, and we follow a young American woman who travels to Bly Manor, and she's going to become the new au pair to a little boy and little girl. And of course, if you watch The Haunting of Hill House, this is a scary story full of ghosts and spirits. So what proceeds in Bly Manor is a series of mysterious occurrences, mysterious events, creepy ghosts lurking around every corner. It's that sort of thing, and just perfectly timed for October, for the month of Halloween. So what are my personal thoughts and feelings about Bly Manor, and kind of comparing it to Hill House in some ways? I did do a review of Hill House sometime last year, I believe it was, and I spent like a good hour talking about Hill House, you guys, because I loved it that freaking much. Bly Manor, it is, in some ways it's similar to Hill House, but in other ways it is kind of different. I think both shows definitely share that sense of suspense and tension and uncertainty, and yeah, you know, this whole thing of, okay, what's around the corner, what's the big deal, you know? And I think very much like Hill House, Bly Manor, the themes, they both share very similar themes. They're about life and death, loss and grief. But I think a big thing that this particular season, Bly Manor, what it's exploring, it's definitely exploring, I think, more of memory. Memory plays a huge, pivotal role with the show, how memory is incorporated and why exactly, how that is in connection with the spirits and the ghosts or whatever. And I think another big theme of this season is definitely this whole idea of love. It's essentially, not only is it a ghost story, but I think it's also largely a love story more than anything. And the thing is, there's various different kinds of love presented in this season, which I really, really loved. You have the love, you have kind of that traditional love, you know, either between, you know, a man and woman or a woman and woman, as is the case as a pair of characters in this particular season. I think even kind of the love of family, the love of family plays a big deal, love of siblings, and yeah, not only like love, you know, the traditional sense of love, but also love in a very abusive, toxic sense as well, with another particular set of characters. So yeah, this season, like I said, though very similar in kind of concept and themes to Hill House, it also does explore some slightly other different things to make it different from Hill House. Because yeah, you don't want an exact copy of Hill House, you know, because that was kind of my concern, that, you know, as much as I loved Hill House, I didn't want this season to be a duplicate, you know what I mean? I wanted it to stand on its own, especially because a lot of the cast is crossing over from Hill House, you know. It's a lot of the same cast, they're not playing the same characters at all. So it's like, I needed to make, for me it's like, I wanted these people to be very different from their counterparts on Hill House, you know. And I just wanted the whole story to be very different. And I think I got that. For me personally, I think I definitely got that. I definitely got some differences between the shows, which I appreciated. So let's talk about the horror aspect of this show, the scary stuff, the reason why this whole thing is called The Haunting, you know, this whole anthology, why is it called The Haunting? So let's talk about the horror elements. I've seen a lot of reviews about this particular season that a lot of people just didn't feel like this was a very scary season, and they kind of didn't like the show because of that. So this is really going to, your enjoyment of this season, it is going to largely depend on just you, the viewer, your own personal enjoyment, the things that you're getting from the season. Because yeah, if you're strictly watching this show because you want the living crap scared out of you, yeah, you're not going to get that with Bly Manor, unfortunately. The Haunting of Hill House definitely had those wild, insane moments of just sheer terror and horror, and I remember covering my eyes on numerous occasions, but then I kind of felt silly about covering my eyes, you know, when you do kind of get to the end of that season. It's kind of like, well, it's not really that scary once you think about it, but it's like the horror was still just so good. And Bly Manor, it really only, when I'm thinking about it, Bly Manor only kind of incorporates a very minimal amount of horror elements. It kind of occurred to me very, very early on as I was watching this season that I didn't really need to cover my eyes, you know. I didn't really need to cover my eyes. I could kind of, I don't know if predict is the right word, because predict almost sounds kind of terrible, but I could almost kind of sense when something was kind of coming, and I wouldn't necessarily have to cover my eyes, I guess. This Bly Manor, like I said, though it incorporates some horror elements, it is very minimal. But yeah, the horror is not really the point of this season. I think it definitely, instead of relying on the horror, it just kind of more incorporates it in there, to varying degrees, however you're going to enjoy that, I suppose. It definitely relies more on, I think, just that sense of tension and suspense and mystery, and I think the atmosphere, that's the big thing. This definitely had a very gothic mood and atmosphere to me. I feel like I feel like if you're someone who likes classic Gothic literature, you'll really prefer this season. You know, if you like something like Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, or even Jane Eyre, kind of to a degree, it's very, very light on the horror, and it really relies on that Gothic tension and atmosphere. If you're familiar with Gothic literature, I suppose, if I'm making any sort of sense. So yeah, a lot of reviews. There were the people, whenever I would read reviews, there were the people that really loved this season, the people who kind of were a little bit meh on it. You know, I never really saw anybody who just totally disliked the season. But yeah, a big thing is people definitely comparing it to Hill House, because Hill House was such an amazing, engrossing season, and I think you got to get that out of your head. You know, you got to separate the two, because Bly Manor is definitely kind of doing its own thing, I think. And of course, you guys, if you did watch The Haunting of Hill House, a big thing with The Haunting of Hill House, you couldn't just sit and watch things in the foreground. You needed to pay attention to stuff in the background, because you could spot ghosts. You know, there'd be a ghost like randomly up here in a corner, or down here in a corner, over here behind something, you know. I really love that about Hill House. And Bly Manor does the exact same thing, and I was prepared for that. I went into Bly Manor thinking, okay, Hill House incorporated just random ghosts in the background. I definitely need to make sure I pay attention to what's going on in Bly Manor. And I'm glad I did, because Bly Manor does the exact same thing. There'll be something way off in the distance, you know, some sort of shadowy figure. There might be something over here behind a trash bin or something, you know, somebody over here. It was great. I got a great kick out of trying to spot all of the little details and spot all the various different ghosts and whatnot. It made it very enjoyable. So yeah, I do want to give a shout out to the cast, obviously. Sorry, before I do head into the cast, I didn't really kind of go into just some other little quick things here. Yeah, I think this season was very well written. There was a lot of threads to the narrative, you guys, and I do mean a lot of threads. It kind of reached a point I was like, okay, how is all this going to connect? Because I know it has to connect in some sort of way. So yeah, everybody who was writing the show, applause to you guys, because you made all the various threads come together in believable, entertaining ways, that's for sure. So yeah, very well written, very incredibly well directed, you guys. Fantastic, beautiful cinematography. Oh my god. Oh, and another thing, because like I mentioned at the very top of this review, it takes place in 1987. What I liked about the setting of 1987, because there is a reason why it takes place in 1987. There is definitely a reason why. But yeah, it doesn't totally just focus on the fact that it is 1987. You know, it doesn't rely on the setting of the 1980s, and it doesn't, the setting of the 80s does not become distracting. You know what I mean? It does not become distracting, because sometimes I would forget that it took place in the 80s. I would have to remind myself various times, like, oh yeah, this takes place in the 80s. It was never distracting, which I appreciated, because sometimes I hate when something takes place in the 80s and they just make it overly obvious that it's the 80s, and they just go really flamboyant with the clothing and the hair, and it's kind of a little ridiculous. And yeah, this Bly Manor definitely, you know, held back, you know, like I guess the more realistic take of the 80s, you know, rather than the Hollywood take of the 80s, if that makes sense. But yeah, I definitely liked how the 80s were incorporated into the show. There is a reason why it takes place in the 80s. And yeah, you do get those reveals, you know, why exactly, rather than why not make it take place, you know, in the modern era like Hill House did. Okay, so yeah, I do want to move on to the cast really quickly. As I mentioned, there's a lot of crossover from Hill House, but yet nobody, all of the crossover, all the various different crossovers, yet nobody is playing the exact same character, which is nice. So yeah, definitely starting off with Victoria Pedretti, who plays the au pair, Danny Clayton. Victoria Pedretti, once again, a terrific, marvelous, emotional, well-acted performance from her. Danny is, you know, this bright and young au pair, her whole future ahead of her. She really wants to help these children. But yeah, she has a mysterious backstory. You know, we do get those reveals about her backstory, kind of who she is at her core, which I loved. Moving on to Oliver Jackson-Cohen. He plays Peter Quint. Oh my god, I seriously loved Oliver Jackson-Cohen in this season, you guys. I mean, I really loved him in Hill House to begin with, but yeah, his character in this is wildly different from Hill House. I think a lot of people are going to be very pleasantly surprised with like how his character is in this season. Peter Quint is definitely your... I don't want to call him your villain. I feel like villain is too strong a word for him, because villain almost makes him more one-dimensional, and he's definitely not one-dimensional. He definitely has some very deep layers. He's definitely more of like your antagonist, your foil to all of our protagonists. And Peter Quint, he is a rather despicable character, but I weirdly enough just really loved watching every little thing he was doing. I saw a really great review, somebody talking about the Peter Quint character, and they were talking about that, you know, as his backstory does get unfolded at some point, you do kind of get this weird sense of sympathy for him, but it does not justify his actions, but you can definitely comprehend his actions, and I really thought that was a great way to kind of, you know, discuss his character, that what he does is not justifiable, but as you are watching it, you can at least comprehend it. I just thought that was a really well written kind of analysis of his character. So yeah, I loved how Oliver Jackson-Cohen just really made that character kind of much more than what he was on the surface. And then yeah, you have Amelia Eve, who plays Jamie. Jamie, she's the gardener of Bly Manor. Jamie, she comes across as rather kind of rough and gruff. Like, she's almost not very approachable, but once she is approachable, you do kind of just fall in love with her. You love her character. I really loved the character of Jamie. She was just so great as her story kind of just fleshes out through the whole thing. Then you have, is it pronounced Tina? I think it's pronounced Tina. Tina Miller. She plays Hannah Gross. Hannah Gross is the housekeeper of Bly Manor. Ooh, seriously, this performance was so good. Hannah Gross, she's kind of stern and no nonsense, but she has a light, fun side to her as well. And the thing is, what's so great about her character, she has such a loyalty to Bly Manor, a devotion to Bly Manor, a devotion to these children. But yeah, that devotion, it's like, is that the most healthy thing, you know? When she could be, you know, living her life elsewhere, perhaps, you know? And yeah, Hannah Gross definitely has one of the more interesting stories, and very emotional as well, which is all I can say. And then you have, let me make sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Rahul Kolili, something like that. He plays Owen. Owen is the cook. I loved Owen. Owen was just the most sweetest, most adorable, the most precious thing ever. It's like, everybody, you must protect Owen. I loved Owen. Seriously, I adored Owen. He has a great backstory and history as well. Seriously, some of the just really emotional moments with him as well. Oh my goodness. You have Tahira Sharif, who plays Rebecca Jessel. What you need to know about the Rebecca Jessel character, she is the previous au pair before Danny arrives. So Miss Jessel, you kind of learn a few things at the, like, you know, in episode 1 of the season, that you know a few things about her, what has transpired. But as of course this is the haunting of Bly Manor, and if you saw Hill House, you know there's always these little delicate twists and turns, and so of course the character of Miss Jessel, you learn more than what you do initially learn about her in episode 1. And things do start to kind of unravel and make sense. And yeah, seriously, Tahira Sharif, a marvelous, breathtaking performance from her. I really love the character of Rebecca Jessel. And we have also Henry Thomas, who plays Henry Wingrave. He's the uncle of the 2 children. Seriously, I'm just really loving Henry Thomas, you guys. I really freaking loved him in Hill House. I really loved him in this. His role is definitely a lot more minimal in this particular season. He definitely plays a much bigger role in Hill House. He kind of just comes in and out of Bly Manor more than anything. But yeah, I really love the character of Henry Wingrave, because he just kind of comes across as this, you know, I don't like you, I hate people, I'm all about money and greed and this and that, don't particularly care about my niece and nephew, you know. But yeah, of course, once again, if you watched Hill House, you know there's always these little twists and turns. Of course, there's little twists and turns with Henry Wingrave as well. That makes him a much more fascinating character than he initially comes across in episode 1. And then, you guys, I gotta talk about the kids, okay? I gotta talk about the kids. I gotta gush about the kids. We have Benjamin Evan Ainsworth, who plays Miles, and Amelia B. Smith, who plays Flora. Wow. Seriously, I was absolutely blown away by these 2 child actors, you guys, especially the little boy playing Miles. Miles, especially, was the most impressive to me. Hill House did a great job of casting the kid actors as well. I was just thoroughly impressed by those kids in Hill House, because if the kids didn't work, the whole show would have fell apart. And it's very much the case with this season of Bly Manor as well. If the kids don't work, the season kind of falls apart a little bit. So yeah, Miles and Flora, they seriously, they had to, these 2 children had to deal with some incredibly emotional, powerful scenes, to the point that, you know, their acting, it had to come across like they were adults, you know. Like I said, especially the boy playing Miles, seriously, I mean, his acting, if this boy is not cast for future roles, I'm going to be thoroughly upset, because this boy is like the future of Hollywood, I feel like, because he was that freaking good. That's how impressed I was with him. I don't know if other people feel the same way, but seriously, the character of Miles especially, I mean, there's a reason why he's kind of, the character is behaving the way that he is, which I can't really talk about. There is a reason why, and I think the Benjamin Evan Ainsworth, it's like he understood the character perfectly. I think he understood what this performance needed, and he pulled it off brilliantly. Because if he couldn't pull this performance off, then when you would get other little reveals later on down the line, it would be just confusing and wouldn't make sense. So yeah, I definitely, seriously, Benjamin Evan Ainsworth, wow. And then yeah, the little girl playing Flora, just the most sweetest, cutest little thing. Her little British accent, I loved it. For some reason, little British kids, I love little British kids, you guys. They're just always such incredibly talented actors compared to American children for some reason. But yeah, little Flora, and then yeah, her little catchphrase was always like, perfectly splendid. I loved her. She was so cute. So you guys, that is it for my thoughts and feelings on The Haunting of Bly Manor. Overall, I freaking loved this season. I found it just as good as Hill House, to be quite honest. I know there's going to be people who don't agree. I think there's a lot of people who think this is a bit more subpar, but I personally still thoroughly loved Bly Manor. I was hooked, I was engaged, I was looking around for ghosts and spirits. I was just really curious about all the various different things going on. I did. I loved it. Well written, well directed, well acted. And yeah, what's next for the Haunting franchise, you guys? I'm still crossing my fingers for The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. I need them to somehow do The Fall of the House of Usher, you guys. I would freaking die if they did that. So, you guys, in the comments below, like I said, please, please, please talk about spoilers with me if you have seen A Bly Manor. And yeah, how do you compare it to Hill House? Did you like it more than Hill House? Did you like it equally? Did you like it less? Just let me know your thoughts and opinions. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.